Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Max Sawyer. I'm a first-year MEM student in the IPLM track. 601 and the summer intensive, however, will not be my first experience with Western Colorado University, as I've spent the last 3 years here in the Gunnison Valley working on my undergraduate degree in environment and sustainability. Today, I want to share with you the story of us and the story of now from my viewpoint. I hope you all enjoy. Ask what our community is and the reasoning behind how we define community on our own individual level. If you were to look up the definition of community online, you would find something along the lines of, quote, a social unit with some form of shared commonality, unquote. This definition leaves a lot open for your personal interpretation of what community is and what community means to you. Similar to many of the questions that we are asked, community can be defined on a number of levels. Is your community composed of the few people that you see every day? Or is it composed of a global population made up of people, some of whom you may never meet? Or is community more than just people? For me, community is multifaceted, composed of both the geographical and the social aspect. On the geographical side, my community is here in the Gunnison Valley, the place in which I live, work, recreate, and socialize. Further, this geographical community is composed of the people who are here and with whom I interact. But the community is also composed of the landscape and our ecological counterparts who also reside here in the Gunnison country. And even though I'm not originally from the Gunnison Valley, I am from California, I define it as my community because this is where I am and this is where I can make a difference today. For me, having community that I can interact with on a daily basis is important, and that aspect comes with all of the subsets of a larger community. A larger community of the Gunnison Valley is composed of the businesses in town, the recreationalists, land managers, the students and staff of Western Colorado University, individual programs like the MEM, student clubs on campus, teams. All of these play a role in creating the community that is found in the Gunnison Valley. I know that it is a community because I feel at home when I drive into town on Highway 50 or when I walk back onto campus after a long break. But I also know because I feel at home when I'm biking or hiking out at Harmon Rocks, or if I'm relaxing on the edge of the Gunnison River. I can walk down Main Street and have conversations with vendors and patrons and know a lot of them. And I can have the same experience on campus with students and staff, where I can talk to them almost anywhere I see them, almost anytime. And you especially know that it's a community when you can walk in a city market to buy groceries, and every time you go, you know somebody else there. Those were some of the factors that I thought of when I was defining what community meant to me in the terms of story of us. So, a story that I have for one of the moments when I realized that the Gunnison Valley was my community was in the fall of 2018. We had just returned from an out-of-state trip capped with a long van ride back to Gunnison from the Denver airport. We'd only been gone a couple days, but when the van came over the last hill on Highway 50 and Hearst Hall and the east edge of campus came into view, I remember thinking that it was nice to be home. That afternoon, I also did a run on the trails behind campus, and I was standing at the top of the hill, above the water tanks, looking out over the university and the town, awash in trees in various shades of yellow and orange, and all capped by a sunset over the Palisades. And I remember that experience being one of community. Community in the sense of sagebrush and the colorful trees of the fall. Community in the sense of friendly people who are also out there on the trails. And community because I felt like I was at home. To keep the concept of home in mind when you think about community as we transition from the story of us to the story of now. and how it's important for us to realize the limitations of our definitions of community and challenge the shortfalls that come with those limitations in order to promote sustainability and resilience within our communities. At the end of last fall, I was talking to one of the professors at the University for Sustainable Development in Eberswalde, Germany. At one point in the discussion, I made a comment about the resiliency of the Gunnison Valley and the community within the Gunnison Valley, without too much thought into how I was using the term resiliency. Was I referring to resilience on the environmental scale or the social? Was I caught up in thinking in the bubble of the ENVS department? Was I caught up in the bubble of the university? Or was I thinking about the entire Gunnison Basin? At the time, I don't think I was thinking too deeply of any of those scales. However, that professor challenged me to look closer at what it means for a community to be resilient. And since that conversation, I've noticed that the Valley is lacking resilience in a couple of areas. A big one that is being addressed on several fronts is food security and local production. Gunnison is highly dependent on non-local food because it is difficult to grow and we have a short growing season up here. But addressing this in an increased capacity would boost our community resilience in a couple of ways that would address both the social, economic, and environmental aspects. Similar to many other areas in the country, we can also look at increasing resiliency in areas including transportation, public transportation, transportation that isn't centered on vehicles, resource use, resource management, efficiencies in multiple different areas, and equitable and social resilience as well. The takeaway in this regard then is that all communities can continue to grow and improve and challenge themselves in ways that will make them better off in the future. Of Gunnison, I hope to see a community that is better connected and more friendly to different modes of transportation that deviate away from motor vehicles. I hope to see a community with increased access to sustainable, small-scale community gardening opportunities. And I hope to see a community with ample communication and educational resources that are widely available to all, creating a platform from which to serve community members. As I often point out, this resilience starts with a great educational system and a great system of community communication. Because from there, progress is made through community involvement and community action. And if we're thinking positively, I would like to note that we are on the right path here in Gunnison. Student projects at Western, both undergraduate and graduate alike, help out on the resiliency front every year. This year, for example, solar panels were installed at the ice rink and the Blackstock government building in town. The food pantry had a new programming introduced to promote visitation. And in the spring, Gunny Gold compost was provided for free at the ice rink to promote backyard gardening. Mountain Roots expanded their community farms, and all of the CSAs in the valley were sold out. Thinking about that process and progress and resiliency, I would like to go back for a second to think about the story of self-assignment from last month. In that assignment, I talked about how I ended up in the Gunnison Valley and some of the travels and experiences that I had between this community and the community I was in back home in California. I ended the story of self with Gunnison, and that led to the perfect transition to the story of us, where I defined why Gunnison is my community now. As we move to the story of now, I wrap the whole idea up, as we always should, with a vision of progress for the future. Therefore, through this assignment, the place-based aspect of thinking about problems and solutions was not lost. Place and community are vital aspects that form both problems and solutions, but must never be forgotten as we work through our time as MEM students and as we implement our own projects to promote resiliency within our own communities. On that note, I would like to thank you all for listening to my brief discussion of community, the story of us and now, and please let me know if you have any questions or comments.